She left a note saying she needed to find herself and vanished with $80,000 of our savings. For a year, silence. Then came the text. "I've had my fun. Now I'm ready to be a wife again." I didn't reply. When she showed up at my door, she saw who answered. Her face went ghost white. "My name is Bradley Matthews, but everyone calls me Brad. I'm 50 years old, and until last year, I thought I had it all figured out. A solid marriage to Melissa, 2 grown kids making their way in the world, and a business that practically ran itself. 4 premium car wash locations across the county, pulling in about 10 grand a month in passive income, while my managers handle the day-to-day operations. Looking back, the warning signs were there for months. The separate bedrooms started 6 months before she left. Melissa claimed I snored too loud, but we both knew that wasn't the real reason. Our bedroom had been dead for 18 months before that. Every time I tried to initiate anything, she'd turn away. "I'm tired, Brad." "Not tonight." "Can't you see I'm stressed?" I blamed myself. Maybe I really was boring. Maybe I'd gotten too comfortable, too predictable. My best friend Drew had tried to warn me. "Something's off with Melissa, man. The way she talks about you at parties, it's like you're not even there." But I brushed it off. Marriage has rough patches, right? Melissa worked as a real estate agent and was good at it too. Always closing deals, always networking at some event or another. She'd come home late smelling like wine and appetizers from open houses, and I'd ask how her day went. She'd kiss my cheek without really looking at me and say, "Exhausting," before heading upstairs to shower. I stopped questioning it because questioning led to arguments, and arguments led to her sleeping in the guest room. Work became my escape. I'd spend longer than necessary checking on the car washes, talking with employees, fixing things that didn't really need fixing. Anything to avoid the cold atmosphere at home. The business was doing well enough that I could lose myself in spreadsheets and maintenance schedules, pretending everything was normal. It was a Tuesday morning in March when I found the note. Not even a real conversation, just a piece of paper on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. "I need to find myself again. Don't wait for me. I'm sorry." That was it. No phone call, no tearful explanation, no attempt to work things out. Her car was gone from the driveway, half her closet was empty, and our joint savings account was lighter by $80,000. I stood there in my bathrobe holding that note and felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. The first few weeks were brutal. I called her phone maybe 100 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. I drove past her office, but her colleague said she'd taken an indefinite leave of absence. Our kids, Colton and Dana, they knew something I didn't. I could tell by the way they avoided my eyes when I asked if they'd heard from their mother. Colton especially got defensive real quick. "She's going through something, Dad. Just give her space." Like I was the problem. Like I was suffocating her by existing. I learned later, much later, that they'd been sending her money, helping fund whatever midlife crisis she was living out while I was back home trying to hold the family together. But it wasn't just the abandonment that hurt. It was the whispers. Our church community, our neighborhood, even some of my business associates started treating me differently. What did Brad do to drive her away? The pastor, Pastor Williams, suggested I pray for reconciliation and examine my own heart. Marriage is a sacred covenant, Bradley. Perhaps this is a test of your commitment. Like I was the one who needed testing. Like I was the one who'd walked out without a word. I learned later that Melissa had been posting on social media about toxic relationships and finding herself again. She painted herself as the victim of a boring, controlling marriage. People who'd known us for years started looking at me sideways. Some of my long-term car wash customers stopped coming by. Revenue dropped 15% in the first 6 months, and my manager Carlos started asking if everything was okay with the business. "People are talking, boss," he said one afternoon as we reviewed the monthly numbers. "Nothing bad, just, you know how it is in a small town." I knew exactly how it was. In a place where everybody knows everybody, a marriage falling apart becomes public entertainment. And somehow, I'd been cast as the boring husband who couldn't keep his wife satisfied. 3 months after Melissa left, I stopped counting the days. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping for a text that never came. I started living again, or at least going through the motions. Wake up, shower, check the business numbers, find something to fix around the house. The lawn needed mowing every week. The gutters needed cleaning. The fence had a loose board that I kept meaning to replace but never got around to. That's when I noticed Jordan. She'd moved into the rental house across the street sometime in late May. I wasn't paying much attention to the neighborhood back then, too wrapped up in my own head. But one morning I was out front watering the flower beds that Melissa used to maintain, and I saw this woman in scrubs getting out of a beat-up Honda Civic. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that settles into your bones after a long night shift. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, coffee cup in one hand, keys in the other. She glanced over and gave me a small wave. I nodded back, not really in the mood for conversation. Jordan Walsh, I learned her name was. She worked as an ICU nurse at County Memorial, pulling 12-hour shifts that rotated between days and nights. She was 35, never married, and living alone in a house that was too big for one person, kind of like me. We didn't talk much at first, just the occasional wave when we crossed paths. She'd be leaving for work as I was checking my mailbox. I'd be taking out the trash as she was coming home. Small-town courtesy, nothing more. Then one Saturday morning, I was in my driveway changing the oil in my truck when she walked over carrying a plate covered in foil. "You look like you could use some homemade cookies," Jordan said, her voice warm but not pushy. She set the plate on my workbench. "Chocolate chip. Fair warning, they're a little burnt on the bottom." I wiped my hands on a rag and looked at her. She wasn't trying to flirt or pry into my business. She was just being neighborly. Something about that simple gesture hit me harder than I expected. "Thanks," I said, my voice rougher than intended. "I'm Brad." "I know," she replied with a slight smile. "I've seen your name on the mailbox. I'm Jordan." "Yeah, the scrubs kind of gave away the profession," I said, attempting something like humor. She laughed, a genuine sound that I hadn't heard in my own yard for months. "Observant. You work from home?" "Sort of. I own a few car washes. My managers handle most of the work." I paused, then added, "Gives me plenty of time to overthink everything." Jordan studied me for a moment, not with pity, but understanding. "Well, if you ever need to overthink out loud, I'm usually home on Wednesday mornings. I make decent coffee." She didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked back across the street, leaving me standing there with a plate of slightly burnt cookies and a strange feeling that maybe life wasn't completely frozen after all. I ate 3 cookies before noon. They were perfect. Wednesday morning came around and I found myself walking across the street to Jordan's house with no real plan. Just a vague invitation and the realization that I'd spent too many mornings alone with my thoughts. The coffee she made was strong enough to strip paint, served in mismatched mugs she'd picked up from thrift stores. "So, what's your story, Brad?" Jordan asked, settling into a worn armchair across from me. Direct, no dancing around it. I appreciated that. "My wife left almost 4 months ago," I said, the words coming easier than expected. "Note on the counter, half the savings gone. No explanation. Just decided she needed to find herself." Jordan nodded slowly, her expression neutral. "That's rough. You hear from her at all?" "Not a word. Our kids seem to know more than they're telling me, but they're keeping her secrets." I took a long drink of the bitter coffee. "Colton, my son, he acts like I'm the villain for even asking questions. And Dana, my daughter, she just cries and says Mom needed space." "Space from what?" Jordan asked. "That's the million-dollar question." I set the mug down on the side table. 26 years of marriage, and apparently I was suffocating her without knowing it. Jordan was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised me. "My dad died last year, cancer. I was his nurse toward the end, took care of him at home through hospice." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "Your brother Russell," she continued, her voice careful. "He was one of my patients 3 years ago. Different hospital, different unit. But I remember him. You visited every day during his final week." The air in the room shifted. I stared at her, pieces clicking into place. "You knew who I was when you moved in." "I recognized you, yeah," Jordan admitted. "But I didn't bring it up because I wasn't sure if you'd remember me. We only crossed paths a few times in the hallways. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." I processed that information, looking for anger or betrayal, but finding neither. "Why tell me now?" "Because you deserve honesty," she said simply. "And because I don't want to build a friendship on something left unsaid. Your brother was a good man. You were there for him when it mattered. That says a lot about who you are." I nodded, throat tight. "He was the better Matthews brother, that's for sure." "I doubt that," Jordan replied with a small smile. "But you can keep thinking it if it helps." We sat there drinking terrible coffee, and somehow the morning felt less heavy than when I'd walked through her door. July hit like a furnace, and the car washes were doing record business. People wanted their vehicles spotless for summer road trips, and my managers were working overtime keeping up with demand. I should have been focused on the numbers, on maximizing profit during peak season. Instead, I found myself looking forward to Wednesday mornings with Jordan. It became routine without us planning it that way. She'd work her night shifts Tuesday into Wednesday, get home around 7 in the morning, sleep until noon, and then I'd show up with pastries from the bakery downtown. We'd sit on her back porch, talk about everything and nothing. She told me about difficult patients, about the emotional toll of watching people slip away despite her best efforts. I told her about Colton's increasingly hostile phone calls and Dana's guilty silences, about how the business was thriving while my personal life felt like it was stuck in quicksand. "Your kids are in a tough spot," Jordan said one afternoon, her bare feet propped up on the porch railing. "They love both of you, but their mom probably painted a picture that makes you the bad guy." What picture could she possibly paint? I asked, frustration bleeding through. I worked hard, provided for our family, never cheated, never raised my voice. What did I do that was so terrible? "Maybe that's the problem," Jordan said quietly. "You were steady, predictable, safe. Some people confuse that with boring." It stung because it was probably true. Melissa used to call me her rock. When did rocks become something to run from instead of lean on? I found out during one of our conversations that Jordan had been briefly married in her 20s, a rushed wedding to her college boyfriend that lasted 2 years before they both realized they'd confused compatibility with love. She understood divorce trauma in a way most people couldn't. She also had student loans from nursing school that she was still paying off, working extra shifts whenever possible. So when people later accused her of being a gold digger, it was obviously ridiculous. Jordan was one of the most financially responsible people I'd ever met. Our relationship developed slowly, nothing physical for months, just genuine connection. We'd talk for hours about books, about her work at the hospital, about my plans to expand the car wash business into the next county. She never pushed for more than I was ready to give. One evening in late July, I was replacing the rotted boards on Jordan's back deck when she came outside with 2 beers. She'd been off work for 3 days straight, catching up on sleep and looking more rested than I'd ever seen her. "You don't have to fix everything in my house, you know," she said, handing me a bottle. "I can hire someone." "I know," I replied, testing the new board's stability. "But I like working with my hands. Keeps me from overthinking." Jordan sat down on the steps next to my toolbox. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Shoot. Are you doing all this because you're trying to move on, or because you're still waiting for her to come back?" I stopped working and looked at her directly. 2 months ago, I would have said I was waiting. Now I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. "Fair enough," Jordan said. She took a sip of her beer, then added, "For what it's worth, I think what comes next might be better than what came before." That night, after I went home, I stood in my bedroom and stared at the photos on the dresser. Me and Melissa on our wedding day, young and stupid and sure we'd figured it all out. I took that photo and put it in a drawer. Not out of anger, just acceptance. Some chapters end whether you're ready or not. When we finally crossed the line from friendship to something more in early August, I discovered I had performance issues, the stress, the betrayal, the self-doubt. It had all taken a toll on my body in ways I hadn't expected. The first time Jordan and I were intimate, I couldn't perform. I was mortified. "It's normal," she said, her voice gentle and understanding. "Your body is processing trauma too. There's no rush." She was patient, never making me feel less than a man because of it. It took weeks before things worked properly again. But Jordan never made it about her ego or my inadequacy. She understood that healing isn't just emotional. My friend Drew was blunt about the whole situation when I finally told him what was happening. "She did you a favor, bro. You just can't see it yet. Melissa was draining the life out of you for years." Carlos, one of my younger employees, put it differently when he noticed I seemed lighter, more engaged at work. "Dude, I don't know what's changed, but you seem like a different person. More, alive?" Even my reluctant participation in a divorce support group at the community center helped, though I'd initially resisted it. "Real men don't need therapy," I'd told Drew when he suggested it. But sitting in a circle with other guys who'd been through similar situations, I realized my experience wasn't unique. A lot of men my age were getting blindsided by wives who'd decided marriage was boring. By September, Jordan and I had grown comfortable with each other in ways that surprised me. She had a toothbrush in my bathroom. I had a key to her place for emergencies. Nothing official, no labels, just two people who'd found something worth holding on to. We'd started talking about the future cautiously, carefully, like people who'd both learned that plans can evaporate overnight. It was a Tuesday night in late September, almost exactly 1 year after Melissa had walked out, when everything changed. I was in the garage organizing tools when my phone buzzed on the workbench. Jordan was inside making dinner because she'd insisted I needed to eat something besides sandwiches and takeout. Unknown number, but the message preview made my stomach drop before I even opened it fully. I've had my fun, now I'm ready to be a wife again. Can we talk? No greeting, no apology, just that. Like she'd been on vacation and was ready to come home now that the weather had turned cold. I stared at the screen until it went dark, then read it again when I woke it back up. A full year of silence, and this was what she chose to say. Jordan appeared in the garage doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Dinner's almost ready. You coming in, or should I bring you a plate out here? I handed her the phone without a word. She read the message, her expression shifting from curious to understanding to something harder. Are you going to respond? Jordan asked, her voice carefully neutral. No, I said, the word coming out more certain than I felt. There's nothing to say to that. She's going to try again, Jordan warned. People like that, they don't take silence well. She was right. Over the next 3 days, more messages came through, each one more desperate, more manipulative than the last. I made a mistake. Please. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. The kids miss having us together. That last one made my blood boil. The kids. Like Colton hadn't been sending her money behind my back. Like Dana hadn't known exactly where her mother was this entire time while I worried and grieved and rebuilt my life from nothing. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I did something I should have done months ago. I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Barbara Stone, who specialized in divorce cases where one party had abandoned the marriage and stolen marital assets. The consultation was enlightening. Mr. Matthews, if your wife wants to reconcile, she's going to have to do it through legal channels now, Barbara said, sliding papers across her desk. And given what you've told me, I'd recommend we start gathering evidence of any extramarital affairs. That'll strengthen your position considerably. How do I do that? I asked. Private investigator, I have someone I work with regularly. He's discreet, thorough, and fast. If there's something to find, he'll find it. I signed a retainer agreement that afternoon, not out of revenge, but protection. Jordan was starting to matter to me in ways that scared me, and I needed to make sure Melissa couldn't blow up what we were building with some legal claim to my assets or my life. When I got home, Jordan was sitting on my front porch, still in her scrubs from her shift. She stood when she saw me, searching my face for answers. I hired a lawyer, I said simply, and a private investigator. If she wants back in, she's going to find out it's too late. Jordan didn't say anything. She just walked over and wrapped her arms around me, and I let myself hold on to her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to shift under my feet. That night, I turned my phone completely off and left it in a drawer. Whatever Melissa had to say, she could say it to my attorney. I was done being her safety net. The knock came early on a Saturday morning 2 weeks after that first text message. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Jordan was upstairs taking a shower. We'd spent the night before going through old boxes in my attic, sorting what to keep and what to finally throw away. It felt symbolic somehow, clearing out the past to make room for whatever came next. The knocking was insistent, demanding. I knew who it was before I even looked through the window. Melissa stood on my front porch looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, wearing an outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked tan, rested, like she'd spent the past year at a spa instead of destroying a marriage. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there looking at this woman I'd spent 26 years with and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no longing, no curiosity about where she'd been or what she'd done. Just a cold, empty space where those feelings used to live. The shower upstairs shut off. I heard Jordan moving around in the bedroom, getting ready for her day shift. Melissa knocked again, harder this time. Bradley, I know you're in there. I can see your truck in the driveway. Please, just talk to me. You need to leave, Melissa. There's nothing to talk about. I made a mistake, she called through the door, her voice taking on that pleading tone she used to use when she wanted something. I was confused. I needed time to figure things out, but I'm ready now. I want to come home. This isn't your home anymore, I said, my voice flat and factual. You left. You took $80,000 and disappeared for a year without a word. You don't get to just come back because you're ready now. Bradley, please, I love you. I've always loved you. I just lost my way for a while. I almost laughed. Lost her way, like she'd taken a wrong turn instead of deliberately walking out on everything we'd built together. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Jordan appeared at the top of the landing wearing one of my old t-shirts and her hair still damp from the shower. At 5 months pregnant, she was just starting to show. We'd found out about the baby 3 weeks ago, right around the time Melissa had started sending those desperate text messages. The timing felt like the universe making a point. Want me to answer it? Jordan asked quietly. I stepped back. Yeah, I think that would be perfect. Jordan walked to the door and opened it before I could second-guess the decision. Melissa's carefully constructed expression shattered the moment she saw who was standing in my doorway, in my house wearing my clothes. Her eyes went from Jordan's face down to her stomach, which was just starting to show a gentle curve. All the color drained out of Melissa's face like someone had pulled a plug. Can I help you? Jordan asked, her voice polite but firm. Not hostile, not smug, just present and unshakable. Who are you? Melissa finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm Jordan, she replied simply. And you need to leave. Brad made it clear he doesn't want to talk to you. Melissa looked past Jordan, trying to make eye contact with me, but I'd already turned away. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee, listening as Jordan calmly closed the door and locked it. Through the window, I watched Melissa stand on the porch for a long moment, her perfect composure completely demolished. Then she turned and walked back to her car, her steps unsteady like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Jordan came into the kitchen and stood beside me. You okay? Yeah, I said, surprised to find it was true. I really am. 2 days later, Colton showed up with his wife Ashley. They found me in the driveway, washing one of my personal vehicles, something I did on Sunday mornings to clear my head. We need to talk, Dad, Colton said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. About you replacing Mom like she never existed. About you moving some stranger into her house and getting her pregnant. First of all, this is my house, I said, keeping my voice level but firm. Your mother walked out on it over a year ago. Second, Jordan isn't a stranger, and she's not replacing anyone. She's building something new with me. The argument that followed was ugly. Ashley called me selfish. Colton accused me of abandoning family values. I finally told them both to get off my property before I called the police for trespassing. But 3 weeks later, it was Dana who reached out, not with accusations or demands, but with a simple text. Can we meet for coffee? Just the two of us. I met her at a small cafe downtown on a cold November morning. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth looking nervous and guilty. Thanks for coming, Dad, she said, as I slid into the booth across from her. Of course. You're my daughter. I'll always make time for you. Dana's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I should have reached out sooner. I should have stood up for you when Colton was being awful. What she told me next confirmed everything I suspected. She'd overheard Melissa on the phone with her friend, laughing about me, calling me predictable and boring. When asked why she wanted to come back now, Melissa had said, because stability looks better when you're broke and alone. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything I suspected. Melissa hadn't loved me for who I was. She'd loved what I provided. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a cold February morning. My private investigator had done his job well. The evidence showed a 3-year affair with Kevin Hudson, a real estate investor she'd met at work conferences. Hotel receipts, text messages, witness statements from colleagues who'd known about the relationship. When the judge asked if the information was accurate, Melissa looked at her hands and whispered, I made mistakes. These aren't mistakes, Mrs. Matthews, Judge Hall said firmly. These are deliberate choices made over an extended period. I walked out of that courtroom with Jordan's hand in mine, feeling free for the first time in years. Our daughter, Grace Matthews, was born that spring. This was the life I was supposed to have.